In a recent paranormal Reddit discussion, parents shared stories about their children, maybe, possibly, almost undeniably seeing ghosts. Like cats and dogs, children just seem to be more in touch with the other side than adults. Horror movies may have planted that idea into our minds, but these anecdotes totally back it up. While a few Redditors offered stories of their children encountering friendly or well-meaning ghosts, others shared stories that could be the premise for one of those aforementioned horror movies. From kids seeing red-eyed men to toddlers giggling at dark, seemingly empty corners, these eerie tales will surely keep you up at night. These are 6 kids' ghost sightings from Reddit that will creep you out. 1 from Reddit user Vanilla Gorilla. My daughter was 4 years old when we lived in our last home. I was a single mom at the time, so it was just she and I alone in the home. I always got an uncomfortable feeling in her room, particularly the closet area, but never thought much of it. Until one evening I had put her to bed, and as I was doing chores, I walked by her room and heard her whispering. I listened for a bit, thinking she was talking to herself, but it was definitely a two-way conversation, with her saying, okay, stuff like that. I walked in and asked her who she was talking to. She smiled uncomfortably and said, "No one." I took her out into the hall and she wouldn't say anything, but I could tell she was afraid. Finally, we went outside the house. She said there was a man in her room who didn't want us in the house, and he had told her this and to tell her mom to leave. I moved us out a month later. She has not since ever had any episode like this. 2. From Reddit user Barf Dexter. My son is 8 and isn't the type of kid who's ever been scared of the dark, being alone, etc. A few weeks ago, my husband told me he saw a ball roll out of the playroom. He didn't realize at first that nobody was in there. He didn't say anything about it to our son. A few days later, my son came upstairs saying he felt something touch his leg. My SO and I just kind of brushed it off. Kids exaggerate, right? A few days later, we were out somewhere, and when we came home, my essential oil diffuser was on. Nobody had been there to turn it on. We were a little freaked out, but tried not to make a big deal. Now, my son has been saying that something is touching him, once on his back, and then repeatedly poking his elbow. He's saying he's scared, who wouldn't be? But I've tried to not play into it too much, and explained that sometimes our minds play tricks on us, and there's nothing to be afraid of in our own house. Nobody has ever said anything about ghosts before all this, so it's not like he's repeating things he heard. 3. Reddit user V1Intage M1sery. My son is 10 now, but when he was 3, he said he saw a man with a big hat standing in his bedroom doorway staring at him while he tried to sleep. The man disappeared after a while, but he could feel him sit down on his bed. He still randomly brings it up, so I don't think it was just a 3-year-old's overactive imagination. 4. Reddit user Full Worse in My Hair. When my sister was about 1-year-old her, my mom would stay up all night while the rest of the house was asleep. My mom's a night owl naturally, so she didn't really mind staying up late looking after my sister. One night, while we were all asleep except her and my sister, something weird happened. My mom was sitting in the recliner and my sister was propped on her lap, facing her. My sister kept staring at the corner of the wall that meets the ceiling, staring and giggling. My mom turned around and obviously nothing was there, but she was still staring and smiling, happy as ever. She even started waving. Eventually, after my mom was creeped out, she got my sister's attention to do something else. The way our house is set up, our living room and kitchen are connected. Later on in the night, my sister was standing in the kitchen. My mom had the light off, so it was dark in there, giggling at another corner. She was pointing, laughing, waving. She would just stare off into the dark, and my mom would repeatedly call her name, and it still wouldn't get her attention. My mom got really creeped out that night. As far as I know, that was the only night it happened. user Fuzzy Bandits. When I was a teenager, I used to babysit my cousin, Alyssa. She was little, maybe almost 2, maybe a little older, old enough to say sentences. I'm giving her a bath before bed when she looks out into the hallway and gets a terrified look on her face and starts crying. At this moment, my aunt's Pomeranian starts going nuts as well, barking and growling into the hallway. The atmosphere in the room became uncomfortable, and I started getting scared. I took her downstairs from the 3rd floor in the townhouse to try and calm her down. I asked her what was wrong, and she said something along the lines of, "The man with the black eyes was there." When I continued to pry, she looked up at the 2nd floor stairs, her eyes getting big, and looks at me, bringing her finger up to her mouth and said, "Shh," while shaking her head. No. 6. Reddit user Mystery Lady. When my daughter was around 8 years old, she twice saw the apparition of a tall man wearing a cowboy hat in our apartment. One time, he's standing in the hallway with a woman and child, all of them dressed in old-fashioned clothes. Another time, she saw him lying beside me in bed. That time, his eyes were glowing bright red. She and I never said anything to the landlord who lived downstairs because we weren't sure how he would react. One day, I decided to test the waters by nonchalantly asking the landlord if he had ever seen anything strange. He said he had once seen a man come up through the door that led into the basement. It was one of those doors that closed flush with the floor, walk across the kitchen and pass right through the back door. I asked him to describe the apparition, and he said it was a tall man wearing a cowboy hat. If you enjoy this type of content and would like to see more of it and support the channel, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications.